So you sat down and you told them, not the version you tell people at parties, not the cleaned up one, the real one, the whole thing, 10 minutes maybe. And the person across from you is somebody who has heard literally thousands of stories, somebody whose entire job is to stay neutral and unimpressed, stopped writing, looked up, sat there for a second longer than felt comfortable, and said one word, remarkable. That was it. They didn't say strong. They didn't say brave. They didn't reach for any of the soft, warm words people throw at you when they don't know what to do with what you just told them. They said, remarkable. And here's the thing about that word coming from that mouth in that context. It doesn't mean what it means at a dinner party in a clinical room. Remarkable is a technical word. It means outside the expected range. It means the data does not match the model. It means something is happening here that the textbook didn't prepare them for. You're the something. Let me back up because I want you to feel where you actually were when this happened. You didn't walk in there expecting validation. You walked in there expecting to be diagnosed. You'd already decided somewhere on the drive over that you were probably the problem. That's what people do when they finally make that appointment. They show up convinced they're about to get the label they've been hiding from. You had the speech ready. You were going to apologize for taking up the hour. First rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. Second rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. You are going to downplay everything. You are going to make it easy on them because that's what you do. Even there, even sitting in a chair you paid for, even with somebody whose only job for 60 minutes was you. And then they asked you the question, and something in you, some part you forgot you had said, no, not today. Today I'm telling somebody the truth. So you did. You told them what actually happened. The whole sequence, the thing before the thing, the part you usually skip, the part you didn't tell your closest friend because saying it out loud felt like making it real. You told them what it cost. You told them what you did to survive it. You told them about the nights you don't talk about. And while you were telling it, you watched their pen slow down, then stop, then settle on the page like it wasn't needed anymore. You didn't notice it at the time, but you noticed it later. They weren't writing because they didn't want to miss what was happening. You think you're being analyzed. They think they're learning something. That's the gap I want you to sit in for a second because this whole video is about that gap. For most of your life, you assumed the people in the room with you knew more about your situation than you did. The teachers, the bosses, the partners, the therapist you tried before this one. You assumed they had a framework you didn't and that your job was to fit yourself into it. You assumed there was a normal way through what you were going through and everybody else had the map and you were just bad at reading it. That assumption is so old in you that you probably don't even notice it anymore. It's the water you swim in, and one word from one person snapped it. Because here's what they actually saw when you were talking. They didn't see somebody falling apart. They didn't see somebody being dramatic or stuck or playing the victim or any of the words your enemies use to keep you small. They saw the actual structure of what you'd survived. They saw the load. They did the math the way they were trained to. They ran your story through the model they've been refining for 15 years. And the model came back with something they couldn't explain. The math said you shouldn't be sitting up. The math said you shouldn't be functioning. The math definitely didn't say you should be the one comforting them. But that's another conversation. The math said this person should be a case study, and instead you walked in apologizing. Think about that for a second. Think about who you've been being. You've been walking around with the kind of internal resume that would make a researcher's jaw drop, and you've been spending it on making other people comfortable. You've been carrying something heavy enough to break most people, and you've been worried about taking up too much space in a 1-hour appointment. That's not humility. That's not modesty. That's a habit that got installed in you a long time ago by people who needed you to never count what you were actually doing, and it worked until it didn't. Until somebody in a quiet room used the wrong word for the way they trained you to see yourself. I want to talk about that word again, remarkable, because the people who hurt you had words for you too, and you've been carrying their words around for so long that you forgot a professional could look at the same set of facts and reach the opposite conclusion. They called you dramatic. They called you difficult. They called you sensitive, broken, too much, not enough. They had a whole vocabulary for keeping you small. And one person paid to be objective sat with the same information and used a completely different word. So which one is true? Don't answer that fast. Sit with it, because the answer is going to do something to you if you let it. The people who used the small words had a reason to use them. They needed you to be small so they could be the right size next to you. They needed your story to be the kind of story people don't have to take seriously. Because if your story was the size it actually is, then the way they treated you becomes the kind of thing they can't go to sleep with. So they kept you small with words year after year. And one person who didn't need anything from you, who had no investment in the outcome, used a different word because they weren't lying, because they had nothing to lose by saying what they actually saw. You know which one is true. You've always known. Here's what I want you to do with this. And I'm going to be honest, because the easy version of this video would just be vindication. And that's not enough for you. First, you don't have to take that word and announce it to anybody. You don't have to message the people who called you dramatic and tell them what a professional said. That urge will come. Don't act on it. The whole point is you no longer need their team to know they were wrong. You knowing is enough. That's the win. That's the only win that actually changes your life. The other one, the one where they admit it, that one feels good for an afternoon, and then you wake up and you're still you, and they're still them. The real win is internal. Keep it. Second, and this one's harder, you don't have to live up to remarkable. The word didn't come with a job attached. It wasn't a verdict that now requires you to perform. People hear something good said about them and immediately start worrying about how to deserve it. You're not auditioning for the word. The word was a description of something that was already true before they said it. You were already remarkable when you walked in. You were already remarkable in the parking lot. You were already remarkable at the worst night of your life, the one you still can't quite talk about. The word didn't change anything. It just named what was already there. Let that sit for a minute. Because there's a quiet kind of power in not needing to prove the things somebody just said about you. There's a third thing too, and this one I almost didn't say. You're allowed to take this word with you into rooms it doesn't seem to fit in. The cubicle, the kitchen at your parents' house, the text thread with the people who still don't get it. You don't have to act on it in those rooms. You don't have to bring it up, but you can carry it. You can sit there with it sitting in your chest like a small warm thing, and you can let it change the shape of how you take up that chair. Nobody around you has to know it's there. That's the part they can't take from you. The internal weather, the word that lives behind your ribs, now that's yours. And listen, I know what part of you is doing right now. Parts of that wants to discount this, that wants to say, well, they only said one word. Maybe they say that to everyone. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. That voice has kept you safe for a long time by talking you out of things that were really happening. It's a habit. It's not the truth. The truth is, somebody trained to be unimpressed was impressed by you, and that means something. You can let it mean something without making it your whole personality. Just receive it. Just let it land for once. Most people go their whole lives without ever hearing something true about themselves from somebody qualified to say it. You did on an ordinary afternoon in a quiet room from a stranger who had no reason to give you anything other than the truth. That happened. You were there. So now what? Now you go back into your life, and the people who use the small words are still going to use them. That part doesn't change overnight. The difference is that now there's a competing piece of evidence sitting in your chest, and every time they reach for a small word, you've got something to put next to it. You don't have to argue. You don't have to wave it around. You just have to know. The next time somebody who's never sat across from a real witness tries to tell you who you are, you can let them be wrong. Out loud, in private, in their head, wherever they're being wrong, let them. Their word against the word, their guess against the data. You already know which one holds. The room went quiet for a reason. That day in the quiet is still doing its work somewhere underneath everything right now. It wasn't meant for you. The conversation was already happening when you walked up. The door was mostly closed, or maybe it was a phone left off mute, or a text thread somebody scrolled past without realizing you were standing right there. However it happened, and the how doesn't really matter. Your name was in somebody's mouth. You spend time with your family? Sure I do. Good. Because a man who doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man. In a room, in a tone, and they didn't know you could hear it. What they said wasn't what you expected. And I need you to sit with that for a second before I explain what I mean, because the easy version of this, when you lose your character, you lose everything. Remember, that would be they were talking badly about you. You got angry. Now it's war. That's not what happened. What happened was stranger than that. Worse in some places, better in others at the same time. And that combination, that specific cocktail, is what changed everything. Let me break it apart. There was a voice in that conversation. Well, my brother has a sword and I have my mind. A mind needs books, like a sword needs a whetstone that hurt you. Somebody you thought was safe. Somebody who to your face had always been warm, supportive, careful with you. And in that room, when they thought you weren't there, the warmth was gone, not replaced by cruelty. Exactly, replaced by something almost worse. Indifference, casual dismissal. Your name came out of their mouth the way you'd mention a chore you keep putting off, like you were a problem to manage. Not impossible until we fail. If we fail searching for greatness, not a person to consider. They weren't even angry at you. That would have been easier. They were bored of you. And they said it with the kind of ease that told you this wasn't the first time. This was just Tuesday for them. That one landed. I know it. Maybe it's because you don't realize how much you appreciate something until somebody takes it away. Because being hated is something you can fight. Being reduced to an inconvenience by someone you trusted that goes somewhere different, that goes into the do you know that the harder thing to do and the right thing to do are usually the same thing? Part of you that still wants to believe people mean what they say to your face, and it poisons something there quietly. The way a crack in a foundation they will strike, and you will be alone. Sits there rearranging the weight distribution of everything above it. And you know what the worst part was? You couldn't even react in the moment to get anything of value. You have to sacrifice because you weren't supposed to be hearing it. So, you just stood there or kept walking or put your phone down in the barbecue when it just, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like home. And you held your face together while something inside you was doing that thing where it falls very slowly, like when you knock a glass off a counter. You're going to suck every penny out of the tractors. And if it doesn't work, it will work. But you don't. And there's that half second where it's still in the air and you know what's about to happen, but you can't stop it. That's what it felt like to make the greatest car the world has ever seen, the strongest Hercules, as beautiful as it must be. Except nobody else saw the glass fall. Just you. So that was the worst part. Now here's the part you didn't expect. There was another voice. Somebody you had written off, somebody you assumed didn't think about you at all, or thought about you the way the first voice did. And that person, your family, the blood, it's not the same thing. Without knowing you could hear, said something that stopped you cold. They pushed back. They said, no, actually, you don't know what you're talking about. My workers, huh? My friends, they love you because you pay them. You don't know what they've been dealing with. And the way they said it wasn't performative. It wasn't for an audience because remember, there was no audience. They thought they were just talking. They defended you. The way people defend things they've thought about privately for a while and finally got a reason to say out loud, and suddenly you've got two pieces of information that don't go together. The person you trusted is not who you thought. The person you dismissed is more than you knew. Family cares about you, not what you can do for them. Family's there for the good. In one accidental, unplanned, overheard moment, the whole map got redrawn. That's what changed everything. Not the words, the map. Because up until that moment, you were navigating your life based on assumptions. Me, you are the only one. Everyone else thinks I'm great. Who are all these people? Reasonable ones, sure. You assumed warmth meant loyalty. You assumed distance meant disinterest. You assumed the people who showed up were the people who cared, and the people who stayed quiet had nothing to offer. And most of the time, those assumptions are close enough to true that they work fine. But not this time bad. Oh, they got your back even when it hurts. That's family. That sound like your mother. This time the assumptions were upside down, and you would never have known it if that door had been closed all the way. If that phone had been on mute, if that text had scrolled past 2 seconds later. Think about how much of your life you're running on assumptions exactly like those. Think about how many rooms you're not in right now where your name is being used in a tone you haven't heard yet. That's not paranoia. That's just the math of being a person who exists in other people's stories. You're a character in conversations you'll never hear, described in ways you'd never recognize, defended by people you'd never expect. Man, you don't even care about your own son. The only thing that matters is a great Lamborghini. What do you want me to do? And dismissed by people you'd never suspect. The only difference between you and everyone else is that you accidentally heard one of those conversations. Most people never do. So now the question is, what do you do with it? And I want to be careful here because the first instinct is almost always wrong. The first thing you want to do is confront the person who hurt you. Pull them aside and say, I heard what you said. Watch them scramble. Watch the mask go back on. Watch them try to explain it, soften it. Reframe it into something that doesn't sound as bad in daylight. It's done all the way around. Some of us pulled a lot of crap. Well, clean slate, and you get that moment. You get the satisfaction of watching them squirm. But here's what you'd lose. You'd lose the single most valuable thing you've ever had, which is accurate information about someone who doesn't know you have it. The second you confront, they adjust. They know the mask slipped, so they build a better mask. Family don't end in blood, but it doesn't start there either. And now you're back to guessing. You gave up the only honest read you've ever gotten from them for 10 seconds of confrontation. That's a bad trade. Don't make it. Keep the information. Use it quietly. Let it sit behind your eyes when they're being warm with you. You don't have to be cold. You don't have to change your face. You just have to stop organizing your trust around their performance. That's all. Downgrade them internally and keep moving. They don't need to know they've been downgraded. The adjustment is yours, private and permanent. Now the second piece, the person who surprised you, you don't have to run over and hug them either. That would be weird and they'd know something happened. But you can start paying closer attention. You can start noticing the things you were probably missing before. The small, consistent things that quiet people do instead of performing loyalty. The ones who don't announce their care. The ones who just keep showing up unremarkably without needing you to notice. You probably have more of those people than you think. You were just looking in the wrong direction because the loud ones took up all the space. And here's a thought that might sting a little. How many times has someone like that been standing next to you giving you real loyalty, real attention, and you walked right past it because someone louder was putting on a better show? How many of your quiet people eventually stopped being quiet and just left because they realized you were never going to turn around? You don't have to answer that right now, but if a face just came to mind, that's the map working. That's the overheard conversation doing something useful instead of just hurting. Here's the thing about overhearing something you weren't supposed to. It doesn't give you a weapon, it gives you a map. And a map is only useful if you actually follow it instead of running back to yell at the territory for being different than you thought. Funny thing about giving everything, you'd think it'd be enough. You'd think that when you pour every last piece of yourself into another person, when you show up every single time, when you carry their weight and yours, and still manage to smile at the end of it, you'd think that would matter. You'd think they'd at least, I don't know, stay. But they didn't. And here's the part that eats at you late at night, when the room goes quiet and your brain won't shut off. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't bad timing or wrong place or any of those pretty little excuses people hand you like aspirin for a gunshot wound. They chose it, eyes open, heart full of everything you gave them, and they still walked. That's not heartbreak, kid. That's a decision. And they made it about you. You ever sit there and try to figure out what you did wrong? I know you do. I know because I did. You replay every conversation, every text, every moment where you think, maybe that's where it turned. Maybe I said too much. Maybe I cared too hard. Maybe I was too available, too honest, too open. And you twist yourself into a pretzel trying to find the mistake, the flaw, the thing about you that made them decide you weren't worth keeping. But here's the truth, and it's ugly. So sit with it for a second. There was no mistake. You did everything right, and they still chose to lose you. Let me tell you what everything looks like, because I don't think you even know what you gave. You gave them 200 AM, not the fun kind. The kind where your phone rings and they're falling apart and you pick up even though you have work in 5 hours. You gave them the version of yourself you don't show anyone. The soft one, the scared one, the one that says, I need you too, and hopes it doesn't get used against you later. You gave them patience when they didn't deserve patience. You gave them silence when they needed space and showed up the second they came back. No questions, no punishment, just you. Again, like always, you gave them the kind of loyalty that doesn't announce itself. The quiet kind. The kind that just stays even when staying cost you something nobody sees. And they took it. All of it. Like water from a tap they didn't pay for. Didn't even say thank you most of the time. Just expected it. Like it was owed. That's what gets me. Not that they left. People leave, that's the human condition. People come and people go, and you learn to live with the rotating door. What gets me is that they left knowing. They knew what you gave. They felt it every day in the way you held them together when their own hands were shaking. And when it came time to make the choice, stay or go, fight or fold, they looked at everything you put on the table and they folded. Not because the hand was bad, because they didn't want to play anymore. And you're still sitting at the table wondering what went wrong with the cards. Nothing went wrong with the cards, kid. To play or quit. And that right there is the specific kind of cruelty that doesn't leave bruises. Because if they'd screamed at you, if they'd done something unforgivable, if there'd been a fight or a line crossed or a clear moment where everything shattered, at least you'd have a reason. At least you could point to the wreckage and say that that's why it ended. But they didn't give you that. They just left quietly with a shrug and a half-hearted sorry and a look on their face like leaving you was just another Tuesday. Like the months, the years, the everything you poured in was just a phase they went through a season. And you were the weather they waited out. See? That's the part nobody tells you about loving someone who isn't built for it. It's not that they can't see your worth. They can. That's the cruel part. They see it clearly. They just don't want the responsibility that comes with it. Your love came with expectations, not unreasonable ones. Just the basic human kind. The kind where you expect somebody to show up the way you showed up, and that was too heavy for them. Not because it was actually heavy, because they're weak. And weakness, real weakness, doesn't look like fragility. It looks like someone choosing the easier option and dressing it up as freedom. So they left, and they probably told themselves a story about it too. Some version where they needed space, needed to find themselves, needed to grow. And maybe they even believe it. But you and I both know what really happened. They had gold sitting in their hands and they let it fall because holding it meant they had to be someone worth holding it. And they weren't ready for that. They might never be. And now you're here. Angry, hollow, confused, replaying the ending like a song you can't get out of your head, trying to figure out how you lost someone who never actually held on. I'll tell you something, sweetheart. You didn't lose them. You can't lose what was never really gripped. They were always half in and half out. One foot in your world and the other pointing toward the exit. You just didn't want to see it, because seeing it would have meant admitting that the love you were building was a house with one wall. But I see you. I see what you're holding and how hard you're trying not to let it turn you bitter. I see the way you still check your phone sometimes. Not because you want to talk, but because part of you can't believe they actually left. That part of you, the one that still expects them to show up and say, I made a mistake, I want to come back. Let that part grieve. It deserves to. but don't you dare let it drive. You know what? Nobody talks about the mornings. Everyone talks about the 3 a.m. part, the lying awake part, the staring at the ceiling part. But it's the mornings that really get you. That half second between sleep and awake where you forget it happened, where the world is still intact and they're still yours and nothing broke yet. And then the remembering, like stepping off a ledge, every single day, every morning you have to lose them again, fresh from scratch. And nobody sees that part. Nobody knows about the daily funeral you hold before your feet even hit the floor. Because here's what happens next. They're going to reach out. Not now. Not while you're hurting. Later when you've gone quiet. When you've started rebuilding in ways they can see from a distance, the gym, the career, the peace on your face that wasn't there before. They'll send that text, the casual one that pretends nothing happened. Hey, was thinking about you, miss your energy, and every fiber of your being is going to light up. Because the part of you that loved them doesn't have a switch, it just dims. It doesn't go off. And in that moment, you're going to have to choose. And this is the only part that matters. So listen. They didn't come back because they realized your worth. They came back because they felt your absence. Those are not the same thing, kid. One is love, the other is withdrawal. And a person going through withdrawal will say anything to get their fix. They'll cry. They'll apologize. They'll rewrite history so clean you almost believe the version where they didn't mean to hurt you, but they did. And the person standing in front of you now isn't someone who's changed. It's someone who ran out of options and remembered you were one. Don't be an option for someone who was supposed to be your person. I know it's hard, God. I know it's hard because the love was real on your side. That's what makes it burn the way it does. You weren't playing, you weren't performing. You gave them the authentic, unedited, terrifying version of yourself. The one that says, I'm all in and I'm not pretending otherwise. And they matched that energy just long enough for you to believe it. Then pulled the rug so fast you're still trying to figure out which way is up. But look at you, still standing, cracked, maybe bleeding somewhere nobody can see, but vertical. And that right there is the part they underestimated. They thought giving everything meant you had nothing left. But giving everything is what you do, kid. That's not a weakness. That's a capacity. And the fact that you could pour that much into another person and still be here, still breathing, still holding your face together in public, even when your chest feels like it's full of broken glass, that means the well is deeper than they thought, deeper than you thought. You didn't run out when they left, you just stopped pouring into the wrong vessel. So now what? Now you take all that love you kept handing to someone who couldn't hold it, and you pour it somewhere? It sticks. Your work, your body, your mind, the 3 people in your life you never left when it got ugly. You pour it into the version of yourself that's about to emerge from this. The one that's colder in the right places and warmer in the right ones. Not heartless, selective, not broken, educated, not empty, redirected. And that's the version they should have been afraid of. Not the one who loved them, the one who stopped. And if they come crawling back, and they will, you remember one thing. You gave them everything. 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 And they looked at it, they held it, they felt its weight. And they still chose to lose you. That's not your failure. That's their verdict on themselves. Because anyone who holds everything and still walks away isn't looking for love. They're running from it. Let them run. You stay. You build. You become the thing they lost and can't replace. And when they finally realize what they threw away, when it hits them at 3 a.m. the way it hits you now, you don't answer. Not because you're cruel, because you're done. They chose to lose you, kid. Let them live with the choice. We tried to poison you because you're an insane, degenerate piece of filth and you deserve to die. Ah, look at you walking in there like it's nothing. Checking in at the front desk with that voice, that calm, pleasant, and fine thank you voice that you've been using so long it doesn't even feel like a performance anymore. Filling out the clipboard. The one that asks you to rate your pain on a scale of 1 to 10. As if your pain has ever fit on the scale designed for people who have only had one thing go wrong at a time. You circled a 4. You always circle a 4. A 4 means I'm here, but I'm not going to make this about me. A 4 means I need help, but not enough to take up too much of your time. A 4 is a lie you've been telling medical professionals for so long, it has its own posture. The nurse called your name. You stood up like it didn't cost you anything. Smoking marijuana, eating Cheetos, and masturbating do not constitute plans in my book. She took your blood pressure. She took your weight. She typed something into the computer without looking at you. She asked you the screening questions. Any changes? Any new symptoms? Any concerns? And you said no. You said no, the way you always say no. Quickly, lightly, like the honest answer would take longer than the appointment allows. And then the doctor came in. She's been your doctor for a while. Or maybe she hasn't. Maybe she's new. Maybe you've been passed between 4 of them in 3 years. Because the system isn't built for people like you. It's built for people who have one problem and then get better and then leave. Either way, she came in, she sat down, she opened your file, and she stopped. Not dramatically. Not the way it happens in movies where the doctor holds a scan up to the light and gasps. It was smaller than that, quieter. She was scrolling to the chart on her screen, and her scrolling slowed, and then it stopped, and she leaned back in her chair about 2 in, and she looked at you over the top of her glasses. And then she looked back at the screen and under her breath, not to you, not to anyone, just to the air in the room. She whispered it. How is this person still standing? She didn't mean it as a compliment. That's important. She didn't mean it the way people mean it when they say you're so strong, which is what people say when they want to acknowledge your pain without actually sitting in it with you. She meant it clinically. She meant it the way an engineer means it when they say, how is this bridge still standing? With genuine diagnostic confusion. Because your file, the actual medical document that represents the accumulated history of your body, does not support the person sitting in front of her. Let me tell you what she was looking at. I don't know why you want to kill him so badly. He's a good guy and a great businessman. She was looking at a chart that started with something most people would consider a full story on its own. The first entry, the thing that happened that first brought you into the system, the thing you probably don't even mention anymore when people ask how you are because it's been absorbed into the background noise of your life, because you've normalized it, because you had to. Because if you treated every wound like a wound, you would never get out of bed. That first thing, it's still in the chart. It's still on page 1. And it was enough on its own. That first thing was enough to justify a very different kind of life than the one you're living. But then there was the second thing. The one that came while the first one was still healing. The one that overapped. The one that arrived during the window when your body was supposed to be recovering, and instead had to start fighting on a second front with resources that were already depleted from the first. That's in the chart too. And in the margin of that entry from a previous doctor, there's a note that says, patient presents as stable, which is medical language where I don't understand how this person is upright, but they seem to be managing. So I'm going to document that and move on. And then the third thing, and this is the one I need to talk about carefully because this is the one you carry the most quietly. This is the one that wasn't an event, it was a duration. The chronic thing, the thing that didn't arrive and leave, the thing that arrived and stayed, the thing that became a roommate in your body. A low hum you've learned to live with. The tax on every single day. Ever since my diagnosis, I came to realize, and you kick that bastard as hard as you can right in the teeth, that nobody sees because you've gotten so good at paying it silently that people forget you're paying it at all. The chronic thing is in the chart as a diagnosis, with the date as if it started on a Tuesday and could be contained by a word. But you know, and your body knows, and now your doctor knows that the chronic thing is not a diagnosis. It is a second job. A job you work every day unpaid, without breaks, without recognition, while simultaneously working the first job of being alive. She scrolled past the surgeries, however many there were. She scrolled past the medications, the ones that worked, the ones that didn't, the ones that traded one problem for another, and made you choose which version of not okay you preferred. She scrolled past the referrals to specialists who each looked at one piece of you and none of them looked at the whole. She scrolled past the imaging, the blood work, the follow-ups you made, and the ones you missed, because you couldn't afford the co-I, or couldn't get the day off, or couldn't face another waiting room where the magazines are from 2019 and the receptionist doesn't look up. And then she got to the part of the chart that isn't medical, the part that modern systems now include because somebody finally realized that a body doesn't get sick in a vacuum. The social history, the life section, the part where someone at some point typed a few sentences about what was happening around you while all of this was happening inside you. And that section, those few dry, clinical, understated sentences about your circumstances, is what made her lean back those 2 inches. Because the section says what you never say. It says that while your body was doing all of that, while the first thing and the second thing and the chronic thing and the surgeries and the medications were happening, you were also navigating a life that was not making it easier. It mentions the loss, it mentions the stress, it mentions the housing, the work, the caregiving, the thing you were holding together for someone else while your own structure was compromised. It mentions in the flattest possible language the conditions under which you were doing all of this, surviving, and the conditions were not favorable. She sat there, this woman who has been practicing for decades, who has seen more charts than she can count, and she did something she doesn't usually do during a routine visit. She read the whole thing, start to finish. She read it the way you'd read a novel about someone you couldn't believe was real. Not because any single entry was the most dramatic thing she'd ever seen. She's seen worse individually. She's seen scarier diagnosis. She's seen harder surgeries. What she hadn't seen or hadn't seen often enough to stop being stunned by was this density, this accumulation, this specific, relentless, compounding stack of things happening to one person who keeps showing up to appointments with a 4 circled on the clipboard and a voice that says, no, no, new concerns. Here's what she wanted to say to you and didn't, because doctors are trained not to say it. Because saying it breaks the clinical frame, because the moment she says it, she's not a doctor anymore. She's a person, and the room doesn't have space for 2 people being human at the same time. She wanted to say, I don't know how you're doing this, not how you're surviving. She can see the how of that. The medications, the adjustments, the sheer biological stubbornness of a body that has been asked to quit and hasn't. She means how you're doing this with grace, how you're walking in here with clean clothes and a calm voice and a question about her day, how you are, circling a 4 when your chart is screaming a 9, how you have somehow over the course of years and conditions that would have reduced most people to a permanent state of crisis, maintained a way of being in the world that looks from the outside like someone who is fine. That gap between what the file says and what you present is the thing she cannot reconcile, and she has been trained to reconcile things. And since I'd very much like to keep my job, how about you kind of get the out of my way? I want to talk to you about the body now. Your body. The one you live in. The one you have probably been at war with. The one you have probably blamed, cursed, resented, apologized to, negotiated with, and occasionally on the very good days thanked. Your body is not the enemy. Your body is the only witness to everything you've been through who has never once lied about it. Every doctor you've seen has gotten a partial story. Every friend has gotten the version you could afford to tell. Every family member has gotten the version that wouldn't make them worry too much. But your body has the unedited version. Your body kept every receipt. Every sleepless night is in your cortisol. Every grief you swallowed without processing is in your inflammation markers. Every time you chose to keep going when stopping was the medically reasonable option, your body logged it. Not as a complaint, but as evidence. Your chart is not a record of your failures. Your chart is a record of your body refusing to let you be erased. And that refusal has a cost. You know the cost. You feel it in the mornings when everything is stiff and heavy and the distance between the bed and the bathroom feels like a commute. You feel it in the evenings when the fatigue isn't tiredness, but something deeper, something geological, something that lives in the bones and not just the muscles. You feel it in the moments when your body sends you a signal and you override it because you have things to do and people to take care of and a life to maintain that doesn't pause for your biology. But here is what the cost also means. Stay out of my territory. And this is the part I need you to hear. The cost means the body is still in the fight. A body that has stopped fighting doesn't send signals, doesn't produce pain, doesn't get stiff in the morning, doesn't generate the fatigue that drags you down. At 8 p.m., those signals, the ones you've been treating as the problem, they are not the problem. They are the body's way of telling you it's still operational, still reporting for duty, still running systems that, according to the chart on that screen, should have shut down a long time ago. Your pain is not your body failing you. Your pain is your body showing up to a shift it was never staffed for and doing the work anyway with whatever it has left in sending you the invoice. And here is the part that would break her if she knew it. The part that's not in the chart because the chart doesn't have a field for it. While all of this was happening to you, you were taking care of someone else. You were driving somebody to their appointment while you were 3 months overdue for your own. You were making dinner the night after a procedure because someone in your house needed to eat, and nobody else was going to do it. You were carrying someone else's emergency in your arms while your own body was sending you signals you were actively ignoring because the person in front of you needed you more than you needed to sit down. You were answering the phone at 2 a.m. for a friend who was falling apart, and you stayed on that call for an hour and a half, and when you hung up, you didn't go back to sleep because your pain had woken up with you and it doesn't have a snooze button. That's nowhere in the file. The file tracks what was done to you and what was done for you. It does not track what you were doing for everyone else while your own system was running on emergency reserves. I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot and you think that of me. No, I am the one who knocks. It doesn't know that you are a hospital and a patient at the same time. That you were administering care with one hand and receiving it with the other. That the same body that was setting off clinical alarms in one room was holding another person together in the next. No chart has a column for that. No intake form asks, while you were managing your own condition, how many other people were you keeping alive? But if it did, if that column existed, that's the one that would have made her whisper. And here's something very quiet I want to say about the waiting room. You sat in it for 20 minutes before they called your name. You sat there with your clipboard and your and your calm face. And across from you, in one of those plastic chairs, there was someone else. You don't know their name. You'll never know their chart. But for about half a second, your eyes met and something passed between you. Not words, not recognition. Exactly. Something lower than that. Something mammalian. Something that said, I see that you are carrying something and I am also carrying something. And neither of us will say it out loud, and that is okay. That half second of silent acknowledgement from a stranger in a waiting room has sometimes meant more to you than entire conversations with people who know your full history. Because that person wasn't performing care. They were just one body recognizing another body that was doing something impossible and choosing, like you, to circle a 4 and sit up straight. Your doctor closed the chart. She looked at you, and in that look was something you've been waiting a very long time for someone in that room to give you. Not pity. You've had pity. Pity is what people give when they don't know what else to do. I couldn't have them kill you. This was something rarer. This was clinical respect. The kind of respect a professional gives when their expertise meets something that exceeds their training. She respects what your body has done. She respects the sheer structural integrity of a person who should, by the numbers, by the data, by the accumulation of evidence in that chart, be somewhere else entirely and isn't. You're here. You're sitting in that paper gown under fluorescent lighting with your 4 circled on the clipboard and your shoes lined up neatly by the exam table. And you are, by every metric she has access to, an impossibility she can document but not explain. She won't say any of this out loud. She'll adjust your medication. She'll order the labs. She'll schedule medication. She'll order the labs. She'll schedule the follow-up. She'll type her note, and the note will be clinical and measured and will not contain the sentence she whispered under her breath. That sentence will stay in the room. It will stay in the air between the two of you, unspoken, unrecorded, unofficial, but she'll carry it the way doctors carry certain patients home with them. Not the dramatic ones, not the emergencies. The quiet ones, the ones who walk in on their own 2 feet with the chart that says they shouldn't be walking at all. You'll check out at the front desk. You'll schedule the follow-up. You'll walk through the waiting room past people who have no idea what you're carrying. Say my name, Eisenberg. You're goddamn right. Because you carry it the same way you carry your bag on one shoulder like it weighs nothing. Because you've been doing it long enough that your posture has adapted to the weight. You'll walk out into the parking lot, into the daylight, into the ordinary continuation of a life that is anything but ordinary. And somewhere behind you, in a room that smells like hand sanitizer and latex, a woman is staring at a screen that has your name on it and she is shaking her head very slowly with something between disbelief and reverence. She has your chart. She has every number, every entry, every clinical note. And none of it explains you. You still standing. That's the whole chart. That's the whole miracle. You still standing. I'm going to use the telephone to call my wife. Okay, give her a call. I will go ahead. Look at you still doing the work no one credits you for. Still sending the email that becomes someone else's idea by Thursday. Still solving the problem nobody realizes was a problem until you've already solved it, and someone 3 levels above you presents a solution in a room you've never been to, in a building you've never entered, to people who will never learn your name. Still doing that. Still showing up, still being the engine in a machine that has never once opened the hood to see who's in there. Sweetheart, they opened the hood not for you, not to thank you, not to promote you. They opened it because something broke. And when they traced the wiring back to see where the power was coming from, they found your fingerprints on everything, and no file with your face in it. Here's what happened. I want to tell it to you slowly. This ain't chemistry, okay? This is art. Cooking is art because you've earned the slow version. Tuesday, 14th floor. A room with a view you will never see from that side of the glass. Conference table that costs more than your car. Water in glass bottles, not plastic, because at this altitude even the hydration is curated. 7 people, 4 men, 3 women, titles, with slashes in them. Senior Vice President / Global Head of something. Chief Strategy Officer / Managing Director of something else. The kind of titles that exist so other titles know where to stand. These are not your people. These are people whose assistants have assistants. People who do not write their own emails. People who have never in their professional lives turned me into a nocturnal animal. Had to explain what they do to someone who might not think it matters. And in the middle of a presentation, slide 9, if it matters, and it does, because the specificity is the point. Someone said. A phrase, a short one, a strategic framing, a way of describing a problem that made the problem suddenly legible to everyone in the room. And the woman presenting it, a senior director, polished, prepared, the kind of woman who rehearses in the mirror and should, because the mirror is the only honest audience at that level. She said the phrase like it was hers. It wasn't hers, it was yours. You said it first. 14 months ago in a meeting so small it didn't have a calendar invite. You said it to 3 people, one of whom was taking notes, and one of whom was your manager, and one of whom was half, listening while checking Slack. You said it because you understood the problem in a way no one else in the room did, and the words came out clean and right, and you probably didn't even write them down afterward because it felt like an ordinary sentence on an ordinary day. But someone wrote it down. Someone carried it out of that room the way a bird carries a seed without knowing what it would grow into, without planting the forest, just holding it in their beak and dropping it somewhere else because that's what birds do. And it got picked up and it got repeated, and each time it was repeated, your name fell off it a little more. The way a return address wears off a package that's been forwarded too many times. By the time it reached the 14th floor, it was nobody's sentence. It was just the way we think about this now. It was institutional grammar. And nobody in that room, not one of those 7 people, knew it had an author. Nobody knew it started in a room without a calendar invite, spoken by a person who went back to their desk afterward and ate a granola bar and answered 4 emails and did not feel hysteric. But then something happened, something that doesn't happen, often on the 14th floor because the 14th floor is designed to prevent it. Someone asked where it came from, not the woman presenting. She didn't flinch. She'd been using the phrase long enough that she probably believed it was hers by now. You want a wire? I got a wire. Speak into the mic the way. You believe a song is yours after you've hummed it for a year. No. It was a man at the far end of the table. Older. Quiet in the way that only people who don't need to prove anything are quiet. He has been in that room longer than anyone else, and he speaks the least. And when he speaks, the room changes temperature. He leaned forward and he said, "And I need you to hear the exact words, because the exact words matter." He said, "This framework, where did it originate? Because I've been seeing it in 3 different decks this quarter and nobody has sourced it." The room got quiet, not awkward quiet, not caught quiet, just quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when a question exposes something the room has been silently agreeing not to examine. The woman presenting said, "It's been part of our strategic language for a while now," which is a beautiful non-answer, which is exactly the kind of answer the 14th floor is built to produce. But I am the shadows. But the man at the end of the table didn't accept it. He said, "Language comes from somewhere. Someone framed it first. I want to know who. And here is where your name entered a room you will never be invited to. Because someone in that room, not the presenter, not the man at the end, someone else, a younger person, a person who is still new enough at this altitude to remember what things look like from the ground. That person said your name quietly, not confidently, almost apologetically, the way you'd say the name of a restaurant you love that you know the table hasn't heard of. They said, I think it might have originated with, and then your name. Your full name said once in a room you will never enter, and the man at the end of the table wrote it down. He wrote your name in the margin of a printout in handwriting only he can read next to a phrase you said 14 months ago in a room without a calendar invite. And that is the closest you will ever come to being in that room. A name in a margin and ink on paper that will be recycled by Friday. But here's what happened next, and this is the part that matters more than any of it. Let me walk you through the chain because the chain is the story. The chain is where the crime happens. And it isn't a crime anyone would recognize because nobody in the chain is a villain. That's what makes it so hard to be angry about. 2 dudes have turned into raspberries slushing flush down my toilet. I can't even take a proper dump in there. That's what makes it sit in your chest like a stone. You can't cough up. You said the phrase to 3 people. One of them, your manager, used it in a weekly update. He didn't steal it. He didn't put quotation marks around it either. He just used it the way people use language they've absorbed, as if it had always been in the air. His manager read update and liked the framing and used it in the deck she was building for a quarterly review. She didn't steal it either. She'd already forgotten where she first heard it. It had become part of how she thought about the problem, and she thought she was articulating her own thinking, and in a way she was, because your words had become her thinking. That's what good framing does. It disappears into the person who hears it. It becomes invisible, and invisible things don't get attributed. From her deck, it went to a strategy document. From the strategy document, it went to a talking point. From the strategy document, it went to a talking point. From the talking point, it went to the senior director, who stood on the 14th floor and said it like she'd thought of it in the shower. 5 people between you and that room. 5 ordinary, well-meaning, busy people who each picked up a sentence and carried it 1 floor higher and set it down without a return label. Nobody conspired. Nobody schemed. The system just works this way. Ideas rise, names don't. And the further an idea travels from its author, the more it looks like it belongs to whoever's holding it. By the time it reached the 14th floor, it belonged to the building. It belonged to everyone. And no. 1. It belonged to the culture, which is a polite way of saying it belonged to everyone except you and the young person who said your name. Let me tell you what's happening to them right now. They're at their desk. They said your name 36 hours ago and they've been thinking about it since. Not because anyone punished them. Nobody reacted badly. The man at the end of the table nodded. The presenter moved on. The meeting ended, but the young person knows what they did. They traced a thing back to its source out loud in a room that is designed to make sources invisible. This city isn't a caterpillar, doesn't spin a cocoon and wake up a butterfly. And they're sitting with the quiet, complicated knowledge that saying your name was the right thing to do, and also the kind of thing that doesn't get rewarded at that altitude. Nobody will thank them for it. Nobody will put it on their review. They broke a small, unspoken contract. The contract that says we don't ask where things come from, we just use them. And breaking that contract doesn't get you fired. It gets you remembered as the person who makes things uncomfortable. They're thinking about you right now in the way that only someone who is 3 years away from becoming you thinks about you, with recognition, with dread, with the early understanding that the building will take their ideas too eventually, the same way it took yours, 1 floor at a time. 1 meeting at a time, 1 missing quotation mark at a time. After the meeting, the man at the end of the table did something he almost never does. He looked you up, not on the company directory, on the actual org chart, the one with the lines and the boxes and the hierarchy laid out like a family tree drawn by someone who doesn't believe in love. He found you. He found your box. He saw where you sit in the architecture. And he saw that you said 4 levels below the room your words just furnished. 4 levels. He didn't say anything about it to anyone. That's not what men like him do. Men like him don't send emails about things like this. They note them. They carry them. They fold the information into a private understanding of how the building actually works versus how the org chart says it works. And the distance between those two, the actual building and the org chart, that distance is you. It could be a problem. Problems, just opportunities that haven't presented themselves. You are the gap between what the company says it runs on and what it actually runs on. Let me tell you what you are to that building, because nobody has. Nobody has ever sat you down and said this, and you need to hear it. Even if hearing it makes you angry, even if it makes you tired, even if the first thing you do with it is argue. You are the original text. Everything above you is a translation. Some of the translations are good. Some of them are polished and professional, and they perform well in rooms with glass water bottles, but they are translations. They are versions of a thing you said first in plainer language in a smaller room to people who weren't listening hard enough. And translations, no matter how skilled, always lose something. They lose the heat. They lose the specific weight of a sentence that came from a person who actually understands the problem because they live inside the problem, not above it. The 14th floor speaks about the problem. You speak from it. That's the difference. That's the thing the room can feel but can't name. That's why the man at the end of the table wrote your name down. because he is old enough and honest enough to know the difference between a translation and the source. Now I know what you're doing right now. I know the part of you that hears this and immediately converts it into bitterness. I know the math you're running. 14 months, 4 levels, 7 people who don't know my name. The woman who said my words like they were hers. I know that math. I watched you run it before. And I need you to stop. Not because the math is wrong. The math is right. You are uncredited. You are unseen. You are operating at a level that the building benefits from without acknowledging. I said we just moved to Ario. I mean, you can do your art like you can paint like the local castles. And I can be a bush pilot. That is real. That is not something I'm going to dress up and call a blessing. It isn't a blessing. It's a structural injustice. And it's boring, and it's old, and it happens to people like you every single day in every building in every city on Earth. But here is what the math doesn't show you. The math doesn't show you that the phrase survived. Your words, your specific framing, your exact way of seeing the problem. It climbed 14 months and 4 levels and survived intact. It survived the telephone game, it survived the attribution loss, it survived being repeated by people who didn't understand it as deeply as you do. It arrived on the 14th floor, still sharp, still useful, still the clearest articulation of the problem that anyone in that room had heard. That is not normal. Ideas do not normally survive that journey. Most of them die on the 2nd floor. Most of them get diluted into mush by the 3rd meeting. Yours arrived on the 14th floor with its spine still in it. That means the idea is structurally sound. And structurally sound ideas don't come from people who are in the wrong place. They come from people who are doing the right work in the wrong room. And here's the other thing the math doesn't show you. The man at the end of the table, he wrote your name down. He doesn't write names down. His margins are famous for being clean. He is a man who has sat through 10,000 meetings and taken notes on maybe 200 of them. Your name is in the margin of a meeting he took notes on. That isn't fame. That isn't a promotion. That isn't the recognition you deserve, but it is a data point in a system you don't have visibility into. Life is not a fairy tale that everyone deserves, and data points in buildings like that compound. You want to know why you'll never be invited to that room? I'll tell you. And the reason is not what you think. It's not because you're not good enough. You are the source material for a room full of people who are paid to sound like they came up with it themselves. The room doesn't exclude you because you're beneath it. The room excludes you because inviting you in would require the room to admit where everything came from. Your invitation would be a confession. Every person in that room who has ever used your framing without sourcing it, who has ever presented your thinking as institutional knowledge, who has ever climbed a rung on a ladder built from your sentences, every one of them would have to sit across from you and know, not apologize. They'd never apologize. Just know. And knowing for people at that altitude is worse than apologizing. Because apologizing is an event you can schedule and survive. And knowing is a weather system that never leaves. So they keep you out not with malice, with architecture, with org charts that put 4 levels between you and the room your ideas already occupy, with titles that tell you where you belong, and job descriptions that tell you what you're for. And you, because you are decent and professional and not the kind of person who storms the 14th floor demanding credit. You stay where they put you, and you keep producing and your work keeps climbing. And the distance between where you sit and where your ideas land keeps growing. and the building keeps running on a fuel source it refuses to name. Here is what I want you to take with you tonight. The room will never invite you. I'm just a guy that got fed up with men like you, and I decided to do something about it. That's what makes you dangerous. That is probably true, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But the room doesn't own the idea. You do. The room is renting it. The room is leasing your language at a markup, presenting it in better lighting, serving it in glass bottles instead of plastic, but the water is yours. It was always yours. And somewhere in the margin of a printout that will be recycled by Friday, a man who speaks the least and matters the most just wrote your name down. Not because someone told him to, because he asked a question that nobody wanted answered. And the answer was you. That name in that margin is not a promotion. It's not justice. It's not even close to enough. But it is proof that the source can be traced, that the original text still has an author, that the building knows somewhere in its private memory exactly who is keeping the lights on. You won't be in the room, but you're in the walls. You're in the wiring. You're in the language they speak without knowing where they learned it. And one day, not today, probably not tomorrow, but one day, someone at that table is going to say your phrase again. I will own him when this is over. Every cent he earns, every cent his wife. And the man at the end is going to tap the margin where your name is written, and he's going to say very quietly to no one in particular, I'd like to meet this person, and he won't be able to, because by then you'll have already left the building, not because you gave up, because you finally built a room of your own, with your own table, with your own glass bottles, with your name on the door instead of in the margin, and the phrase that furnished their 14th floor will be hanging in your lobby, framed, attributed, in your handwriting dated 14 months before they ever heard it. And when they visit, and they will visit, because rooms built on borrowed language eventually need to meet the lender. They'll see it on the wall and they'll know. They always knew. They just never said it out loud until